Hi, my name is Margot. Last Sunday, my grandmother Eloise turned 82. She still lives alone in the small gray brick house at the edge of Willeridge, a quiet town tucked between the hills of Oregon. She's lived there for over 40 years. The shutter's always a little crooked, the mailbox leaning, the porch light flickering even on calm nights. It's not a fancy place, but it smells like lavender and old books, like her. That morning, she baked her favorite almond cake, set the dining table for 12, laid out her best china, and folded napkins embroidered with "Family is everything." Then she lit the candles herself and waited. No one came. Not my mother, not my aunt, not a single person from the family she had raised, fed, celebrated, and forgave 1,000 times over. No, they weren't busy. They weren't across the country. They were in Key West, lounging at an all-inclusive beachfront resort, a resort my grandmother paid for. She had called it her gift to the family, a way to bring everyone together. She said she wouldn't join because long travel's too hard now. But the truth? They didn't invite her. When I found out, it was already past 6 p.m. I was in Seattle getting ready for my promotion dinner, the one where my manager was going to formally introduce me as the new regional project lead. I'd bought a new dress, printed my speech, even curled my hair. The night was supposed to be a celebration, and then I got the message from my mother. Just 4 words. Plans changed. Don't come. No explanation, no punctuation. Just that. I stared at the screen, confused. At first, I thought it was about the dinner in Seattle. But then I noticed the timestamp. It was sent earlier that day. That's when it clicked. My heart dropped. I picked up the small gift box I had wrapped the night before. A hand-stitched handkerchief with Eloise's name on it. Ivory cotton, delicate lace. She loved small, thoughtful things. I tried calling her, no answer. Then, for reasons I can't explain, I opened Instagram. My cousin Jenna had posted a carousel. There they were, all of them. My mom, her siblings, their spouses, my cousins, dressed in white linen, smiling into the sunset, champagne flutes raised against the orange glow of the ocean. Caption, "Resetting with the people who matter most. Dottie family retreat." I couldn't breathe. They didn't forget. They excluded her. They lied. And she was sitting alone in that house, candles melting onto the frosting, probably still smiling like none of it hurt. I canceled the dinner without another thought. I didn't text my boss. I didn't message my team. I slipped out of the hotel lobby and drove straight to Willeridge. It took almost 3 hours. I don't remember most of it. Just the way the sky darkened as the road unwound through the woods, and the feeling in my gut that wouldn't go away. I pulled up just after twilight. The porch light was off. The neighborhood was still. Lawn sprinklers humming, moths gathering near street lamps. Everything was exactly how I remembered it growing up, except this time it felt emptier. I stepped onto the porch. Through the kitchen window, I saw her, sitting perfectly still at the table. Back straight, hands folded, facing 12 empty chairs. The cake sat untouched. The candles had burned halfway down, wax dripping over the frosting. The napkins were folded perfect as always. But no one had come. No one was going to. I knocked softly. She looked up. "Margot?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "You didn't have to come, sweetheart." "Too late," I said, stepping inside. I pulled out a chair and sat down like I belonged there, because in that moment, I did. There was no speech. No toasts, no polished smiles, just the soft tick of the kitchen clock and the faint smell of almond and sugar. I reached for the knife and cut a slice of cake, placed it gently in front of her. "Happy birthday, Grandma." She smiled just a little, the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. "You really didn't have to come all this way." I put another slice on my own plate. I wanted to. We sat there eating cake neither of us wanted. Her hand trembled when she picked up the fork. I saw it, but I didn't say anything. Instead, I watched the candlelight flicker in her tired eyes. "Where is everyone, Grandma?" I asked gently. She didn't answer right away. Her fork clinked against the plate as she set it down. Her gaze shifted to the napkins, then the half-wilted flowers on the windowsill. "I paid for it," she said. I blinked. "For what?" She didn't look at me. The trip, the hotel, the flights, all of it. I felt my stomach turn. Why? They said I wouldn't enjoy it. Too much walking. Too loud. And I thought... Her voice cracked. I thought if they were all together, maybe they'd remember me fondly. She fell quiet. I couldn't speak. Every smile I saw online, every clink of glasses, every staged hug, it was bought by the same woman now sitting across from me, too tired to cry, too proud to ask why she'd been left behind. I looked at her hands, small, veined, folded neatly in her lap, and I felt something shift inside me, not just sadness, something sharper, something like clarity. This wasn't just neglect, it was erasure, and it wasn't going to happen anymore. Not while I was here. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed on the old pull-out couch in the den, the one that creaked every time I moved. The blanket was too thin. The pillow smelled like cedar and rosewater, and the only sound was the low hum of the fridge. But it wasn't the couch keeping me awake. It was the image of her, sitting at that table, too proud to cry, too kind to call anyone out. A whole lifetime of love, given freely. And this was what they gave her in return. I lay there staring at the ceiling, watching headlights pass across the wallpaper in slow stripes. My phone buzzed around 2 a.m. I didn't check it. I already knew who it was from. The family never texted unless something had gone wrong, or they thought you might become a problem. In the morning, I got up early and found Grandma Eloise in the kitchen, already dressed. She was pouring tea into her favorite porcelain mug, the one with faded violets on the side. She looked at me like nothing had happened. "Did you sleep okay, dear?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to scream, but instead I nodded. I did. She handed me a mug and sat at the table like it was just another morning, like there weren't pieces of herself scattered all over this house. Quiet little signs of someone who was slowly being erased. We didn't talk about the cruise. We didn't talk about the party. But when she stepped away to take her pills, I noticed something. A thick envelope half-tucked under a stack of mail. I pulled it out. On the front, in bold blue ink, it read, "Property Transfer Authorization, Sheridan Trust." Sheridan was my mother's married name. I opened the envelope. Inside were copies of deeds. The house. The lake cabin we used to visit in the summer. Even a checking account statement. All of them had my grandmother's name. And my mother's, side by side. But what chilled me was the third signature line on each document. Mine. Unsigned. Blank. They'd drawn up everything as if I'd agreed, as if I'd been in on it. A shared beneficiary structure. For estate clarity, the cover letter said. It was dated 5 weeks ago. I stood frozen in the kitchen, heart pounding. The plan was already in motion, and I hadn't been part of it. Only the decoration. Grandma came back into the room, humming softly, her hands shaking just a little as she reached for a spoon. "Grandma," I said carefully, "did you sign something recently?" "Something about the house?" She looked up at me and paused, her eyes clouding just for a second. Then she smiled, brittle. "Oh, you know how your mother is. She said it was just paperwork, something to help later on." "Did you read it?" She hesitated. She said I didn't need to. I couldn't breathe. She said it was better if I didn't get confused, that she'd handle the details. "Grandma," I stopped myself. She wasn't stupid. She wasn't senile. But she had spent so many years believing that love was obedience, that keeping peace was the same as keeping family. I wanted to shake someone. I wanted to call my mother and demand answers. But instead, I sat down, folded the letter back into the envelope, and placed it gently beside my tea. "I think we should look at everything together," I said, "just to be sure." She didn't respond. She just stirred her tea, slowly, methodically, like if she kept moving, the truth might not settle. Later that day, I went up to the attic. I don't know what I was looking for, proof maybe, a reason, or maybe just something that made this house, her house, feel like hers again, because lately it hadn't. The walls were still covered in framed photos of my mother, formal portraits, staged smiles, nothing spontaneous. And in the back of the attic, behind a dusty trunk, I found it, a small wooden box with a rusted latch. It wasn't locked. Inside were dozens of folded documents, most yellowing with age. There were savings bonds, birth certificates, and beneath it all, a legal envelope marked in cursive, "Last Will and Testament, Howard Green." My grandfather. I sat on the attic floor and opened it with shaking hands. The will was short, clear. Everything was to go to Eloise. The house, the bank accounts, the cabin, the life insurance. And if she passed, if she was no longer able to manage the estate, it was to go to one person. Me, not my mother, not the others. Me. There was no doubt. My name was written in my grandfather's neat script, underlined once. I stared at it for what felt like an hour. When I came back downstairs, Eloise was folding laundry. Her hands moved slowly, carefully over each towel like it was glass. "Grandma," I said, holding the will, "did you know about this?" She looked down at it. Her eyes flicked toward the page, and then away. "I forgot," she said softly. "You forgot Grandpa left everything to you. And me?" She sat down. "I didn't think it mattered anymore. Your mother said it would just confuse people, that it would start trouble." I felt my jaw tighten. "She took everything." "She needed help," Grandma whispered, and I wanted to believe she was trying. She wasn't. She didn't argue. I looked at her small, tired frame, the way she sat, folded into herself, like someone who had finally run out of ways to excuse the people she loved. I realized then, she hadn't just been betrayed. She had been trained not to notice, not to speak, not to ask. And I had stood by for years, letting it happen. Not anymore. That night, while she was sleeping, I gathered every document I could find. Bank letters, medical proxies, insurance paperwork. I laid them all out on the dining table, surrounded by cold slices of birthday cake. It was time to protect her. The way she'd always protected everyone else. Even from the people who called themselves family. I didn't sleep again that night. The documents were spread across the dining table like a battlefield. Old wills, account statements, letters signed by people who had no right to speak for my grandmother. Some pages had coffee stains, others were sharp and recent, printed on thick white stock with corporate logos. I stayed up cross-referencing names, dates, bank routing numbers. It wasn't just shady, it was systematic. My mother hadn't just taken advantage of my grandmother's trust. She'd built a system around it. Durable power of attorney, beneficiary switches, reallocation of accounts. Little by little, she had rewritten ownership under the guise of convenience. And no one had noticed, because no one had bothered to look. But I was looking now. At around 5 a.m., I printed everything and put it into a blue folder. I labeled it in block letters, "For review, legal." I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew I needed help. That morning, I made us both oatmeal with blueberries, the way Grandma liked it, soft and warm with a little cinnamon on top. She sat across from me in her robe, smiling faintly as if everything was fine. I slid the folder across the table. "We need to go over this together." She stared at it, didn't touch it. "Margot, sweetheart, I appreciate what you're doing, but maybe it's better to just let things be." Let things be. It echoed in my head like a warning. "I can't do that, Grandma. Not anymore." She nodded slowly, but I could see the old fear in her eyes, not of confrontation, but of being the problem, of stirring the waters. I changed the subject for a moment. Do you remember that little law office across from the bakery? The one with the dog in the window? She smiled just a little. Fletcher and Reeves. That dog's name is Buttons. He's been there longer than the lawyers. I called them this morning, I said. We have an appointment at 10. She blinked. Today? I nodded. They specialize in elder estate protection, and they know the law. To my surprise, she didn't protest. By 9:45, we were sitting in the small wood-paneled waiting room. Buttons, the office dog, now old and half-blind, waddled over and sat on Grandma's feet like an old friend. She smiled and scratched behind his ears. Something in her relaxed. We met with a lawyer named Dana Reeves, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a steel-trap brain. I handed over the folder. She read silently for 10 minutes straight, flipping pages with increasing speed. When she looked up, she said 4 words. You were right to come. Then she explained, patiently, clearly, like someone who had seen this kind of betrayal before. What my mother had done wasn't just unethical. Parts of it might actually be illegal, especially the forged consent documents and coerced signatures, especially if my grandmother had been led to believe she didn't need to read them. Financial elder abuse doesn't always look like theft, Dana said. Sometimes it looks like caretaking, like convenience, but it's still theft. My grandmother sat quietly, absorbing each word. When Dana asked if she wanted to revoke the power of attorney, my grandmother hesitated. She's still my daughter. Dana nodded gently. She is, but that doesn't mean she gets to take your voice away. Grandma's hands were in her lap, ringing softly. Then, after a long pause, she looked at me. I trust Margot. Dana reached for the proper forms. She can be your new agent. You can change it today. And so she did. That afternoon, we went to the bank, the same one my mother used, the same branch where she had whispered reassurances to the staff, smiled through half-truths, and signed for transfers she said were mutually agreed upon. We asked to see the branch manager. I held the documents. Eloise held my hand. When the manager arrived, I introduced myself calmly and requested a formal account audit. I explained the recent changes to power of attorney, showed the original will, and stated our intent to restore full financial control to Eloise, effective immediately. To his credit, the manager didn't resist. Maybe he'd suspected. Maybe this happened more often than they admitted. He made a few calls, reviewed our forms, and within the hour, everything was frozen for review. By 4 p.m., my mother's name was officially removed from the accounts. That night, we had grilled cheese for dinner, the cheap kind with buttered bread and a slice of tomato in the middle, just like we used to when I was little. Grandma hummed while she cooked, something soft and familiar, a lullaby she used to sing when I had nightmares, the kind of thing I didn't know I still remembered until I heard it again. When we sat down, she looked at me, really looked. You didn't have to do all this. I know. She nodded, her eyes shining, but I'm glad you did. We ate slowly, savoring every bite. There was no toast, no champagne, just grilled cheese, old photos on the fridge, and the quiet knowledge that something sacred had been reclaimed. I didn't check my phone that night. I didn't care what the others were posting, because for the first time in years, my grandmother was not invisible. She was seen, heard, and protected. And I was no longer just a guest in this family story. I was rewriting it. The next morning it began. I was stirring honey into Grandma's tea when the first call came. The screen lit up with MOM, all capital letters. I didn't pick up. I didn't have to. The voicemail came 30 seconds later. Margot, what the hell is going on? The bank froze our accounts. I can't access anything. Your grandmother is confused. Call me back. Now. I set the phone down and exhaled. She wasn't confused. She was clear for the first time in years. I didn't tell Grandma about the voicemail. She was in the living room listening to her old jazz records, the kind my grandfather used to hum along with while reading the paper. There was peace on her face I hadn't seen in so long, but the calls kept coming. By noon, my Aunt Julie had chimed in. "We heard what you did. You're turning her against us. This isn't your business." And then a text from my cousin Jenna. "Wow, power trip much. Just because you skipped the cruise doesn't mean you get to hijack Grandma's life. She's old, not dying." Funny how they were all suddenly concerned now that the money had stopped flowing. I didn't respond. Instead, I met with Dana Reeves again. We reviewed the steps ahead. Secure the house deed, reinstate the original will, notify relevant agencies of the change in power of attorney, file a formal complaint if necessary. "You don't have to push for legal action," Dana said gently, "but you can. What they did may qualify as financial elder coercion." I looked at my grandmother sitting next to me, holding her purse with both hands like a schoolgirl in a principal's office. Her eyes were wide but steady. "I just want them to leave me alone," she whispered. Dana nodded. "We can make sure they don't have access anymore. We can draw that line." That was enough. For now. But my mother wasn't done. That weekend, she showed up. I had just finished watering the garden when I heard tires on gravel. A silver SUV pulled up fast, brakes squealing slightly. My mother stepped out in heels and sunglasses like she was walking into a courtroom. She didn't knock. She just opened the gate and marched up to the porch where I stood. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she snapped. I didn't flinch. "Protecting Grandma." She scoffed. "From who? Her own daughter? Don't be dramatic." "She trusted you," I said, "and you used that trust to take things that didn't belong to you." "I managed things. That's what I've done for 10 years. While you were off living your little career fantasy, I was here, making sure she had heat, groceries, medication. You also made sure she signed things without reading. You removed her name from her own accounts. You booked a family vacation and left her behind. She wanted us to go. She paid for it." That stopped her, for a moment. She glanced at the window, saw the curtain shift. Grandma was watching. She always had been, just quietly, from the sidelines. My mother turned back to me. "You've always been a problem, Margot. Always too sensitive, too opinionated." I smiled just a little. "And now I'm dangerous, too." She stormed off without another word. That night, Grandma didn't say much. But as I was cleaning up the dishes, she touched my arm. "You weren't wrong to speak." "I know. I've just never seen anyone do it for me before." I felt my throat tighten. I squeezed her hand. "You've done it for everyone else your whole life. You deserve to have someone in your corner, too." She nodded. "I just never thought it would be you." That made me pause. "You thought I didn't care?" "No," she said gently. "I thought maybe you were too much like them." I looked at her and shook my head. "Never." In the days that followed, something shifted. The town, this sleepy, quiet place, began to speak. People dropped by, some to gossip, some to support, old friends, neighbors. Even Mrs. Benton from the library brought a peach cobbler and whispered, "Good for you, sweetheart, it's about time." Turns out, everyone had known something wasn't right. They'd seen my mother park in the driveway for 5 minutes and call it visiting. They'd seen the overgrown yard last summer when Grandma was sick and no one came. They'd seen the new SUV my aunt drove around just weeks after the lake cabin was quietly sold. People notice, even when no one says anything. And now that someone had spoken, the silence was breaking. One afternoon, I found Grandma on the back porch with a box of old photographs. She was sorting them into piles, some for keeping, some for donating. "I'm done pretending," she said simply. She handed me a photo, one I hadn't seen before. Me, age 7, asleep on her shoulder during a 4th of July picnic. Her face half sunburned but smiling. "I used to think keeping everyone together meant not choosing sides," she said, "but I realize now not choosing is choosing." and I choose you?" That evening, she wrote a letter. She asked me to help her, so I typed while she dictated. It wasn't long, just 3 paragraphs. She stated clearly that she was mentally sound, financially independent, and no longer wished to have any contact with those who had acted against her interest. She appointed me, formally, permanently, as her guardian and agent. It wasn't a legal document. It was a declaration, and she signed it with her full name, in the same loopy cursive she'd always used to write me birthday cards. The next day, we mailed copies to everyone. My mother, my aunt, my cousins. No explanations, no apologies, just truth, printed in black and white. Grandma didn't flinch when we dropped the envelopes into the mailbox. She just said, "Feels lighter, doesn't it?" And it did. It was quiet for 3 days. Too quiet. Then came the envelope. Thick, certified, hand-delivered, stamped with the words, "Notice of petition, contest of agency and mental capacity." My mother was taking us to court. I read it once, then again. She was arguing that Grandma had been coerced into changing her power of attorney, that I had unduly influenced a vulnerable elder, and that she, as Eloise's biological daughter, should be reinstated as legal guardian in the interest of preserving stability. Stability. That's what they always called control. I felt my stomach tighten. Not from fear, not exactly, more like disbelief, the audacity of it, to spend years quietly siphoning my grandmother's life away and then, the moment someone stopped her, claim the moral high ground. I looked at Grandma. She was sitting by the window, sewing a button onto one of my old coats. When I told her, she paused only for a second. "She always did like courtrooms," she said softly. I smiled in spite of myself. Dana Reeves prepared the paperwork. She was calm, focused, methodical. We gathered statements from neighbors, past doctors, even Grandma's pharmacist, all of whom confirmed that Eloise was mentally sound, organized, and had been managing her own life up until the recent power of attorney transfer, but none of that would stop my mother from trying. The hearing was set for the following Thursday at the county courthouse. Small room, minimal staff. But the consequences, enormous. If my mother won, she'd regain full legal control over Eloise's health, finances, and estate. She could sell the house, move her into a facility, block my access entirely. This wasn't just about money, it was about erasure. The night before court, I couldn't sleep. Again. Grandma found me in the kitchen, pacing. She was in her nightgown, holding 2 mugs of warm milk like some ritual from my childhood. "You know," she said, handing me one, "your mother always hated that you look like me." I blinked. "What?" She said it reminded her that I was still here. We sat at the table, our hands cupped around ceramic. "I'm not afraid of losing," she said. "I'm afraid of forgetting who I am if I don't speak up." "You don't have to be the one to speak tomorrow," I said. "I think I do." And that was that. Thursday morning, we arrived early. The courthouse smelled like stale paper and carpet shampoo. Grandma wore her best blue coat and pinned her brooch, the silver one shaped like a dove, to the lapel. Her hands trembled slightly, but her chin was high. My mother arrived 10 minutes late, all perfume and pearls. She sat across from us, flanked by a lawyer in a sharp suit, and my Aunt Julie, who wouldn't even look us in the eye. The judge was a soft-spoken woman in her 60s. No nonsense. She read through the case file with tired eyes, then looked up. "Mrs. Sheridan," she said to my mother, "you're alleging that your mother was manipulated into signing legal documents. Do you have evidence?" My mother launched into a rehearsed monologue about my ambition, about how I resented the family for excluding me from their success, how Grandma had always been easily confused and reluctant to make decisions under pressure. She painted a picture of me as some calculating granddaughter who had swooped in to isolate and control her frail, senile mother. It would have been comical if it weren't so malicious. Then it was our turn. Dana stood, calm, poised. She listed the dates, the documents, the verified witnesses. She explained that Grandma had passed all mental evaluations, that no one had been pressured, that this was not a financial power grab. It was a protection measure, taken after years of subtle exploitation. The judge listened carefully. Then she turned to Eloise. "Mrs. Green," she said, "do you feel you were pressured into changing your legal designations?" Grandma cleared her throat. She stood slowly, her cane resting against the table, and walked up to the podium. The courtroom went still. She looked directly at the judge. Then, slowly, she said, "She's the only one who showed up." That was it. No tears, no speech, just that one sentence. I heard a shift in the room, a pause. Even the opposing lawyer looked down for a second. The judge exhaled slowly. After a moment, she nodded. "I've heard enough." She ruled in our favor. Power of attorney remained with me. All previous claims dismissed. The courtroom emptied in near silence. My mother stormed out without looking back. Outside, the sun was bright, almost too bright after the stillness of the courtroom. Grandma turned to me and smiled, a quiet, deep smile like something had finally settled in her chest. "Let's go home," she said. And we did. That evening, we didn't talk about the case. We sat on the porch with iced tea and watched the sunset over the hills. Birds dipped low across the yard. The breeze smelled like early fall. At one point, Grandma turned to me. "You know what I remember most about your childhood?" "What?" "You always asked questions, even when people told you not to." I laughed. "That sounds about right. I used to worry it would make your life harder." "Did it?" She shrugged. "Maybe. But look where it brought us." Later that night, I found the old family photo album. I hadn't seen it in years. Inside were pictures I didn't even remember. Birthdays, backyard picnics, Christmas mornings. And slowly, I realized something. In every single photo, Eloise was in the background, pouring juice, holding a plate, adjusting someone's sweater, never centered, never posing. She'd built a life quietly, lovingly, invisibly, and now she was front and center, exactly where she belonged. Life after the hearing didn't change overnight. There wasn't some magical parade or sudden reconciliation. No one sent flowers. No one apologized. The phone stayed silent. And honestly, we preferred it that way. The house felt lighter, though. Not physically. The furniture was the same. The air still carried the soft scent of cinnamon and fabric softener, but there was a new stillness, a clean, settled quiet, like the house itself had exhaled. Grandma slept better. So did I. She started taking small walks again, just up and down the sidewalk, cane in hand, stopping every few feet to point out a neighbor's garden or an unusually shaped cloud. I walked beside her, quietly, not rushing, not filling silence, just being there. She spoke more now, not about the family. That part we gently packed away. Instead, she told me stories I'd never heard before, about her childhood in Vermont, the music she loved in college, how she once almost moved to New York but stayed for love. "I never regretted staying," she said once, "but sometimes I regretted who I stayed silent for." I understood that in my bones. One morning, while organizing the pantry, I found an old recipe box tucked behind a tin of baking powder. It was covered in grease stains and yellowed tape. Inside were dozens of index cards, each handwritten in Eloise's looping cursive. "Is this what I think it is?" I asked, holding up a faded card titled "Blueberry Cardamom Bread, Harold's favorite, not that he deserves it." Grandma laughed, a real full laugh. "Oh dear, I haven't touched those in years." "Well," I said, "we're bringing them back." And we did. That weekend, we baked together for the first time in over a decade. The kitchen turned into a glorious mess. Flour in our hair, sugar on the counter, the smell of butter and cardamom in the air. Neighbors stopped by when they smelled it through the windows. We gave out loaves. They came back the next day asking for more. So we made more. By the third weekend, we had a little table set up on the front lawn with a sign that said, Eloise's Oven, suggested donation, $5. People came. Old friends, church ladies, the mailman, teenagers from the high school down the street. They didn't just buy bread. They sat with us, they talked, they asked questions. Where have you been, Miss Eloise? Right here, she'd smile, just quieter. And with each loaf, with each shared memory or unexpected hug, I watched her rebuild something that had been stolen long before money or power of attorney ever came into play, her place in the world. Meanwhile, I started working remotely. I'd planned to return to Seattle after the hearing, maybe take a few weeks off, but something told me not to rush. So I asked for extended leave. And surprisingly, my company agreed. Turns out I was better at leading projects than anyone had realized, even from 300 miles away. I set up a tiny desk in the back bedroom, next to the old sewing machine. From there, I balanced conference calls with cooling muffins and legal filings with afternoon walks. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and it felt right. One afternoon, about a month after the hearing, I found Grandma sitting on the back porch with a letter in her hands. Her expression was unreadable. Is everything okay? I asked. She nodded slowly and handed it to me. It was from my cousin Jenna. It wasn't long, a few sentences, no apology, just a line that said, if you're ever ready to talk, I'd like to visit. Just me. I looked up. What do you want to do? She paused, then folded the letter neatly and set it beside her teacup. I want her to want more than just me, she said. I want her to want to see. We didn't reply. Not yet. Some bridges need more than a match and a spark. They need time, hands, and real effort. And some, they're not worth rebuilding at all. That evening, we hosted our first porch supper. It started with just the two of us, but then the Porters dropped by with lemonade. Then Mrs. Benton from the library. Then the Jenkins boys who brought cornbread from their mom. Before we knew it, there were 10 chairs on the lawn, candles in mason jars, and laughter echoing into the dusk. No music, no decorations, just people, talking, eating, being. Grandma looked over at me mid-bite and whispered, I haven't felt this alive in 20 years. Neither had I. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, we sat together under the stars. The candles had melted down. The air was warm and quiet. Crickets chirped like background music. You know, she said, I used to think growing old meant becoming invisible. But now? She looked at me, eyes soft and steady. Now I think it just means finally learning which voices matter. The next morning, I woke up early and wrote a letter of my own. Not to my mother, not to anyone from before. It was to myself. It said, you did the hard thing. You told the truth when silence was easier. You chose someone who chose you back, and that matters. That always matters. Then I folded it, tucked it into the back of my journal, and went to join Grandma for breakfast. She was humming when I walked in. Blueberry scones on the counter, 2 mugs of tea, waiting. Life wasn't perfect, but it was whole again. And for the first time in a long time, we were both exactly where we belonged. We turned the spare bedroom into a writing room for me. I don't know what I'm writing yet, but the pages are filling slowly. Stories, memories, maybe even the beginning of something longer. Something true. One Sunday morning, we sat on the porch with slices of warm apple pie and listened to the church bells in the distance. Grandma turned to me and said, Do you ever miss them? I knew what she meant. I miss what I thought we had, I said, not what we actually did. She nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. I think that's what hurts most, she whispered, the pretending. We sat in silence a while longer. Then she added, But I don't have to pretend anymore. That's enough for me. This morning, a little girl from down the street, Lily, age 7, sticky hands and tangled hair, knocked on our door with a drawing. It was a crayon picture of me and Grandma standing in front of our table full of baked goods, with big smiles and wild hair. Above it, she'd written in block letters, "Family equals who bakes with you." I nearly cried. We taped it to the fridge. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe we'll take a trip next spring. Maybe I'll finally write that book. Maybe we'll keep baking until the oven gives out. What I do know is this: family is not just blood. It's not who claims you at holidays or sends cards once a year. Family is who stays, who shows up, who sees you, not as a burden or a duty, but as someone worth choosing every day. And sometimes the people who always waited quietly for others to notice them, they're the ones who, when given the chance, bloom the brightest. This isn't a story of anger. It's about love, quiet, steady, and often unseen. Even when it wasn't returned, it stayed. If you've ever felt overlooked, let Margot and Eloise's story remind you. True love doesn't need permission. It just shows up. Thank you for being here. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. And never forget, you are seen. You are enough. And your presence has power.